Arcana came out and it's coming to the community with a huge storm of confusion and curiosity as to how she exactly performs. But worry not, that's why I'm here to break it down. Without delaying any further, let's get right into the video. In a nutshell, Arcana is basically Isabel's treasure, in a similar fashion to how Trina ended up making good old drunk Scarlet to have good damage. Arcana is providing the same with Isabel, but on top of that, she also provides some bit of extra support. Isabel with Arcana's buff against a boss without core can do a surprising amount of damage that can almost catch up to Cinderella. However, at the cost of this, the issue is the team restrictions that she does have to team building and opportunity cost that happens when slotting her in. If we're talking about a single team setup with Electric, Arcana's team falls a bit short, as the three main Electric units with Cinderella, Summer Niece, and Winter Maiden have so much synergy with one another on top of doing damage on their own. But in the situation of setting up multiple different Electric teams in Electric Solo Raid, then the trade-offs of passing around units could end up being worth or a possibility. Cinderella doesn't lose too much damage, or maybe in some accounts it may even make Cinderella do better damage when setting her up in a team with Arcana. This allows you to have a similar performance with Cinderella when putting her in Arcana team than putting her with both Summer Niece and Winter Maiden. This means that you could put Summer Niece and Winter Maiden into different teams without compromising too much damage for Cinderella. This can be effective for Electric Solo Raid, where you can choose to split your electric DPS into different teams. Isabel is one of the old launch release pilgrims that has been suffering from power creep. Her skill kit has very horrible multipliers as opposed to today's standards, and on top of that, Isabel has a gimmick of reducing full burst duration from the normally 10 seconds into a full burst duration of 5 seconds. This full burst duration of 5 seconds has, more often than not, been detrimental to the team building in Nikke. Usually when having a 5-second full burster like Isabel, you're going to start needing to bring 2 cooldown reduction units in order to have smooth burst transition in between without leaving too much gap in between your bursts. This usually ends up being an issue as it compromises team building for the sake of having more cooldown. Generally, bringing in 2 cooldown reduction units have a worse damage potential than just bringing in 1 cooldown reduction unit and another flex unit that can do better buff on the side. Here comes Arcana to solve the issues that revolve when using Isabel. Arcana does 3 main things to solve these issues, and everything revolves with the condition that she bursts and also that the full burst duration only take reduced time duration. The reduced full burst duration is very important for her as majority of her bigger buffs trigger under the condition that she bursts to gain the Wheel of Fortune buff to herself. And then, at the end of the full burst, while with this buff is still active, a good amount of buffs happen coming from her. This setup doesn't work with the traditional burst 3 units that don't have full burst reduction time because her Wheel of Fortune only lasts for 10 seconds, and it starts at the time she bursts, which means by the time that the full burst ends, the Wheel of Fortune buff has already ended and thus she cannot do some of the buffs that she provides at the end of full burst. Right now there's only 3 units that does reduce full burst duration: SR Rarity Mihara, Vesti, and Isabel. But realistically, mainly Isabel is the one that would be used with her because of the first main thing that Arcana does. 1. She provides an insane amount of buffs to the electric burst 3 that bursted after her. This gives an insane amount of 180% caster's attack and attack damage buff, and on top of that, Isabel's skill 2 makes it more frequent proc, and the main reason why Isabel is the only one that can take advantage of her right now. 2. She has a cooldown reduction that takes effect essentially at the time she bursted. This solves the issue of needing another cooldown reduction unit for units that have reduced full burst time duration like Isabel. And then 3, she provides follow-up buffs after that is decent enough in a position of a flex buffer. Normally the flex position is either a really good DPS or a good off-burst buffer, and this position that Arcana is in isn't too bad. On these follow-up buffs though, there's one thing to pay attention to. Since these buffs start at the end of full burst rotation when she bursted with Isabel, that means that you're mainly able to just capitalize on them during the next full burst. But not only that, you also have to get into the next full burst as fast as possible, otherwise the buffs expire before you can take full advantage of the buffs that she provides. This brings us to the next part of utilizing Arcana to her fullest. While Arcana does provide some buffs, not all of them last the same amount of time. In particular, her bigger buffs for the next burster only barely last a few seconds. Because of this, units who can use up the buffs within the time they are able to burst can take the most advantage out of Arcana. In particular, burst units that front-load the damage within the first few seconds. The biggest benefactor of this right now is Scarlet with Trina or Cinderella's burst alone. There are other units like Winter Maiden or perhaps even Guillotine, but putting them with Arcana is likely probably not making the best use out of them. On top of having only a few units getting the most benefit out of Arcana, there's also the factor of making sure that you have enough energy burst gain to properly burst. Thus, a careful consideration of your burst 2 and burst 1 is also important. Overall, how I see Arcana being used is primarily a solar raid, in particular electric advantage. Not only that, you also have to make sure that your Isabel is properly built as well. Upgrading these two won't be cheap, and on top of that, in return, you're likely going to be taking advantage of them primarily in electric solar raid. This team is a luxury unit and likely not very feasible for majority of the player base. I personally see a huge amount of investment necessary in the first place before they feel the worth of investment. So let's say you did want to go out of your way and build Arcana. Overall, here's my main recommendation of upgrading her. For Arcana, we're going to want to max skill 1 and skill 2 at the very least, as there's a huge amount of damage scaling on these skills, so the budget starts off with 774 and then going into 10-10-7 or higher on the burst. In terms of overload, since there's likely the use of electric advantage, I would primarily focus on getting at least elemental damage and max ammo to help out with energy gain. I would use Resilience or Quantum Cubed if manually playing with her to help out with the energy gain in order to maximize burst rotations. For dolls, I would give her at least SR5 or higher, mainly so that she provides a good amount of buffs for Isabel and also other units receiving her attack buff. For Isabel, since we're going to be needing her as well if we do decide to use Arcana, then we want to properly build her as well. In terms of skill, I would likely put the highest priority of skill upgrades on skill 2 for Isabel. I would set her up like this with 4+ on skill 1 and then level 10 on skill 2 and 4+ on burst. In terms of overload, I would put the highest priority of getting 4x elemental definitely on Isabel. With receiving a lot of attack and attack damage buff already from Arcana, there's a little less priority on attack lines on Isabel compared to elemental. After getting 4 elemental, then I would look into adding at least 1 to 2 ammo lines. Then from there, I would do just a mix of attack, critical rate, critical damage. I think the biggest factor is making sure that you have 4x elemental on Isabel to make it sure that you are using her to her fullest and taking the most advantage of her elemental and using Arcana. After that, constellation line is hit rate, but I wouldn't necessarily aim for it. I would use Resilience or Bastion for Isabel for cube. And then for dolls, it is highly recommended to go R15 or SR5 at least, and ideally pushing it to SR15 as it heavily increases her basic attacks as well to high value. And finally for teams, it's pretty straightforward in terms of building Arcana. Starting off with Arcana and Isabel, the burst 1 options are primarily Volume, Litter, Rouge, Siren, or Rapi Red Hood. The next is the combination of burst 2 and burst 3 that would follow up burst after Arcana and Isabel. The common combo that you can use is Trina and Drunk Scarlet, Mari and Cinderella, or if you use Crown as burst 2 and using Cinderella, then I would recommend using at least Siren for B1. There's also the blanc as burst 2 option if you do decide to use Rouge as B1. And finally, another alternative option to shotgun is Stove, Arcana, Dala, Isabel, and Maid Brevity. Arcana in the most basic sense is Isabel's treasure, in Nikke form. I don't know what shifts up's allergy with giving Pilgrim's treasure, but I guess if they're going to give a Pilgrim an upgrade, they'd rather make a new unit in the form of an altar version and try to make money out of it. For majority of the players, this will be an expensive build, and for likely the main payoff is mainly just electric solar raid. If you don't have Isabel, then this character is an immediate skip already for you. If you don't plan to heavily invest in electric solar raid, then there's a pretty good chance again that this is also a skip for that as well. If you're just aiming for top 3%, I think there's many alternatives to this as they are likely friendlier to your resources. With the upcoming collab coming out soon, I feel that this unit would be a skip for majority of the player base. I can see a lot of potential with this unit though, especially taking advantage of the extra buffs that Arcana provides, alongside with possible better 40-second burst 2 and burst 3 units that can synergize better with rotating burst 2 on Arcana's burst. I can see top rankers using this in some raids, especially if they want to do better on the electric element. At the moment in Nikke, we're getting off the rate of focusing new units for each elemental raids, so if in the future you plan on doing better on electric solar raid, then getting this eventually is a good option, especially for a lot of people that has a lot of Isabel dupes. But for now, I think for majority of the player base, it's probably better off to save your resources. My main recommendation is wishlist unless you wish to perform extremely well on the next electric solar raid. As a word of advice, you're going to have to invest in both Arcana and Isabel. But yeah, that's about it for now. What are your guys' thoughts about these units? Do you think we're not going to get treasures for Drunk Scarlet and Isabel because of this? I think right now it does feel that instead of reworking old characters, Shift Up is planning to make these new units that becomes a duo to other older characters. This allows them to keep making niche units and make some of the older units somewhat relevant, and also keep on the pace that they're going at, which is releasing a new unit every 2 weeks or so. Not personally a fan of it, but it is what it is. Instead of choosing to slow down the release rate of making new units and making higher quality units, they seem to be choosing to go with this route. Anyways, as usual, that's about it for me for now. If you guys have any questions, come visit me at Twitch and follow the channel, twitch.tv/skyglv. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe in YouTube, and I'll see you guys next time.